I went to U of H undergrad. My name is Miranda Ramirez. I'm the co-founder and co-editor of this magazine. So it was my second creative writing course ever was with Giuseppe. I'll get used to it, I promise. And he has this horrible thing that he does to his students where he won't let you change the story you're workshopping, even if you hate it, like, and it's horrible and you don't want to do anything with it and you want to throw it in the trash. He made me stick with the story all the way through to the end. And I think for me that was something that really I needed as a writer, because beforehand I was daunted by revision, and a lot of times I would just start a new piece rather than keep working over and over again. I think personally it improved me as a writer, and it also it improved my taste as a reader, I think, too. And then in your bio, you mentioned Poison Pen, and I'm going to read your bio in just a sec. But I had the honor of Keegan and I actually read At Poison Pen together, representing two different magazines. But I just remember thinking, like, oh, this is terrifying. This is my mentor's reading series, and I don't know if I'm really ready for this. And when I stepped back off the mic, you said something that I thought was token you, which was that you're like, that wasn't half bad. And I was just beaming from that opportunity. I was like, yes, it wasn't half bad. I am ecstatic. And so thank you for that. It's truly inspiring. And on that note, I'll read your illustrious bio.
I just clarify and say that half bad where I'm from is like, really, really good.
Oh, it's very sweet. All right. So Giuseppe Taurino is the Associate Director of the Creative Writing Program at the University of Houston. His essays and stories have appeared in American Short Fiction, Body, Bridge, 8, Epoch, Green Mountains Review, New South, Potomac Review, and elsewhere. He's been awarded an Inprint Brown Foundation Fellowship, a Barthelme Memorial Fellowship in Fiction, and Work Study Scholarships to the Bread Loaf Writers Conference. He is a current board member for Writers in the Schools, WITS, Houston, a co-curator of the Poison Pen reading series, as I aforementioned, and a contributing editor at American Short Fiction. Thank you for joining us, Giuseppe.
Thanks for having me, Miranda. I also remember you in my class, and Vin as well, who's on this feed somewhere, and it was one of my best classes. So thank you all for being awesome students, and thanks for inviting me tonight. Mentorship, I don't know that I always think of myself as a mentor, but I like the idea of giving back, and so to be recognized in a way by a former student really, really sort of makes me feel good, so thanks. I'm gonna read, I guess, the first half of a story, speaking of revision, that I've been fiddling with for on and off several years, and the working title is Are You All Right, Spider? So I'll read, like I said, the first half or so, and it should be in time. I met up with Mick at his childhood home, a cave-like apartment off Jamaica Avenue. His parents were long gone, but the place still smelt of burnt toast and Chanel No. 5. The wallpaper was stained yellow from cigar smoke. I glanced at old photos while Mick finished up in the bathroom. Mick in his communion suit, Mick and his dad at the track, an old black and white of Mick's mom as a little girl. One of me and Mick from the 8th grade in stiff polyester baseball uniforms. Our braces and foreheads glistened. That was our year playing CYO, a few years before we started dealing. The toilet flushed and Mick strutted into the living room. Let's make this happen, he said. In the shadows of the J Train L, we caught up over a slice at Sal's, then walked the old sidewalks in the old neighborhood side by side, hands in our pockets. I know you're a professional do-gooder now, Mick said to me, college-educated and whatnot, but there's this opportunity at a Carvel. My nephew works there. Always hooks me up with an extra. He winked and slapped the nylon of his tracksuit where it bulged over his gut. He paused to look me over to make sure I was serious. I'm listening, I assured him. You don't need to ask your wife first? Watch yourself, I said, and we began walking again. My parents had retired to a sandblasted condo on the east coast of Florida more than a decade earlier. They'd had enough of me and New York winters. Mick was the only person I knew who still lived in Woodhaven. When I left, I vowed to never look back, but as we turned off the avenue and came up on PS 60, my pulse briefly spiked. I fended off an unexpected wave of nostalgia. We cut through the park that flanked the schoolyard and slid past the bench we sold our first dime bags from. On the other side of the chain link fence, a group of kids shot baskets. A few more played handball against the building. 2 girls were pressed shoulder to shoulder near the water fountain trying to light a cigarette. The owner only makes bank drops once a month, Mick said, his eyes glowing with cartoonish intensity. The alarm system's busted and this is his biggest weekend of the year. We're looking at 20 grand in a rinkety dipshit safe that might as well be a file cabinet. Just say the word, I told him. I'm ready whenever. Yeah, you're ready, he said. But are you all right, Spider? I hadn't seen Mick in nearly 3 years, but the smile was automatic, beyond my control. It was one of our old routines. Goodfellas was our favorite movie. No, I thought you said you were all right, Spider. I knew my lines, but I wasn't in the mood to speak them. Just let me know, I said, and veered off toward Woodhaven Boulevard, picking up the pace. We didn't say goodbyes. Know somebody most of your life, and there's a lot you don't have to bother with. Women, he called to my back, they come and they go, but don't, I said, without breaking stride or turning my head, his laughter trailing me down the sidewalk. If it had been anyone else and I had been 10 years younger, I would have doubled back and stomped his face. Instead, I walked toward my car, feeling more alive than I wanted to admit. And so there I was, at 2 a.m, the night after Labor Day, leaning on a parking meter in Forest Hills. After a hot, humid weekend, Metropolitan Avenue smelled like a garbage truck. The promise of rain hung over the city like a wash tub waiting to be tipped. Mick was 20 minutes late and I'd already seen the same cop car circle the block twice. Across the street, the Carvel looked abandoned, nothing more than a rundown standalone one-story. Its rusted neon sign buzzed bright over the avenue like a cherry. 10 more minutes passed before Mick finally texted, "Roof, 5, hustle." A jittery blast of adrenaline coursed through my body. It was a familiar feeling, and if I'm being honest, one I missed. I worked my fingers over the charm in my pocket while I waited for the cop car to pass again. It was on a patrol loop, I realized. Then made my way across the street, up the fire escape, and onto the Carvel's tar roof, which creaked and bent each time I shifted my weight. A few blocks west, cars flicked on the Turnpike. A few blocks east, I could see the window signs for Eddie's Sweet Shop, where the cakes and pastries and every one of their 17 ice cream flavors were made in-house. They might as well be advertising dreams for sale, Evie said the one time She was all about their funky dessert names, things like Songbird Gelato, Landslide Sundays, and a 3-layer cupcake they simply called Oh Daddy. We'd been together nearly a year at that point. I'd been at the nonprofit gig a little short of 2. Thanks to both these things, I'd begun to believe my cards had been reshuffled. Evie and I sat in a corner booth with a view of the avenue. She looked so soft and perfect that I was overcome with feelings I had no frame of reference for. I proposed her over 3 scoops of Holiday Road. No ring, no plan, no real reason she'd actually say yes. She didn't answer till we'd taken the mounds down to the bottom of the aluminum bowl and run our fingers there to catch the dregs. I could marry you, she said, shy and blushing, and working to hold something inside. Happiness, I want to believe, working to contain her happiness. And me, I just nodded and smiled and sucked the cream off my finger, amazed that I had asked, astonished that she'd answered. I guess what I'm saying is, unless you're looking for a Fudgy the Whale or a Cookie Puss, no one would choose a Carvel over Eddie's for anything. Eddie's was the South Queens landmark, constantly jammed with people ready to drop $6 on a waffle cone, while the Carvel was the kind of place you only rolled into because you happened to be passing by with a pocket full of loose change. The night before the heist, I told Evie I was helping Mick with a few deliveries that were only borderline illegal. Contraband cigarettes, I said, refurbished iPads, sneakers that didn't quite make it to Foot Locker. Evie rocked our little boy and sighed. Whose borderline are we talking about here? I could have told her we were selling lemonade and it still would have been an issue. Mick was my oldest friend, which made Evie nervous. By the time she came into my life, I'd already cratered, resurfaced, and worked my way through a sociology degree at Queens College. She didn't know me in my heyday, and I didn't give her any specifics. We sort of ran wild, I told her. Instead of saying we robbed people at knife point, peddled coke, stole cars, broke one guy's leg with an aluminum bat for trying to cheat us out of $10. I might not have told her anything, but one night I'd gotten shanked at the Forest Park bandshell and it left a jagged pink scar the length of an envelope above my ribs. The only piece of evidence I couldn't hide. You promised, she said to me. I hadn't worked in months. Hadn't so much as sniffed an interview since the nonprofit went under. 3 years serving kids who went mad listening to the sounds of their own heartbeat. Thousands of hours teaching those kids to pause and take deep breaths. The first work I'd ever been genuinely proud of. And then poof, my boss was busted for embezzlement and it all folded. The board declared bankruptcy and dissolved the organization. The kids were shipped to ill-equipped psych wards across the city, and Evie and I were suddenly broke and uninsured with an infant just 2 weeks before we got her diagnosis. Talk about a punch in the throat. We need the money, I reminded her. This is all a sign, Evie said, meaning my job, her illness, the unexpected free time together. She was convinced it was our chance to welcome a new dawn. We could embrace the moon goddess's will, she told me, and refocus our lives with a clear crystal vision. Evie was Wiccan. She was always saying things like that. It's the kind of stuff I used to mock, but with Evie it was somehow different. I love the way she found magic in the tiniest little crumbs that littered even the worst days. These days, though, I was tired of feeling helpless, tired of staring at old case files and anxiously wondering what came next. We need to get you free of that poison inside you, I said. There you go again, she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. But baby, there's no freedom from. They call it choriocarcinoma. If they'd spotted it earlier, during, or right after the pregnancy, we'd have been looking at a short, aggressive plan of attack, 90% survival rate. By the time they nailed it down, though, it was too far along. Our boy had come out unscathed, but the tainted cells his growing fetus planted in Evie's womb multiplied and amassed, moving from the placenta to her lungs to her liver and brain. Barely 7 months after giving birth, Evie's chances of pulling through was the kind of long shot you lost your house on. You're a witch, I said. That's gotta count for something. She smiled and set our son in my arms. He smelled like the incense and licorice she constantly burned and chewed. To this day, I can't get within 6 feet of either without twitching. Look at him, Evie said tenderly. He's observing you. I looked for my reflection in his milky almond-shaped eyes. I imagined myself floating, dog paddling, trying to keep from going under. He's such an old soul, she said. Sometimes I feel like he already knows what we're all about. She said this lovingly, with a reverence for the way his existence seemed to make ours bigger somehow. But I'm not gonna lie. The thought of him seeing me unfiltered scared me something stupid. When I didn't respond, Evie drifted to the open front. She paused for a moment, coughed feebly into her thin hand, and disappeared into our bedroom. My little boy wrapped his little hand around my thumb. His pulse quickened against my skin. I pursed my lips and blew into his round, pensive face. He flinched and blinked, and I resisted the urge to do it again. He cooed as I brought my ear to his chest, the lub-dub of his heart flooding my head with a million broken thoughts. His grip tightened, and I reminded myself that he had no control over the havoc his body had wreaked, over the motherless path he was set to travel, over the boulder he dropped into my quickly spiraling life. From the bedroom, I heard the creak of the closet door, the slammed drawer, the faint clink of metal against our dresser. You need to think about him now, Evie said, re-entering the room. He needs to be your first, second, and only priority. Behind her, the curtains filled with breeze. A muffled bass line flared and faded as a car rumbled up the block. What happens if we're both gone? He'd be better off alone than with just me, I wanted to say. I know, I offered unconvincingly. Evie looked at me as if she were about to vanish. She reached into her pocket and her hand emerged with a small silver charm dangling from her fingers. It swung lightly in the space between us. For protection, Evie said. She closed her eyes and mumbled a few sentences I couldn't make out. Keep it in your pocket. I took the charm and shifted the baby. He whined as I buried his cheek beneath my shoulder. I'm doing this, I said, almost excitedly, for us. What a look she gave me. As if I were a stranger who'd snaked in through the window and was holding our baby hostage. Great goddess of day and night, I mouthed, my armpits wet with sweat, the charm now pressed firm in my palm. Protect me with all your might. Evie had sent me off with a protection spell. Simple but powerful, she'd said. All I had to do was repeat the words while visualizing a soft spear of blue light. It had taken all I had not to point out the irony she was silently asking me to ignore, to blurt out, our baby poisoned you, nothing can protect us. But the truth is, I wanted to believe there was magic. Some small part of me, I think, always had, which was why Evie's being Wiccan hadn't sent me running when it first came up. The opportunity to brush up against something inexplicable was a kind of quenching I hadn't realized I was thirsty for. When I first took the nonprofit job, I saw it as a kind of penance for the road I'd been traveling. A sketchy, pockmarked causeway littered with broken social contracts, estranged family, and the kinds of character-shaping decisions best taken to the grave. But before long, I couldn't wash the job off my skin at night. I found purpose in the ebb and flow of heartbreak and satisfaction. But if that job was an introduction to a reality beyond myself, Evie's way of moving through the world was a crash course in the possibility born from embracing that reality fully. An inspiring redemption story, she'd called me the day we met. We were at a day-long mindfulness workshop in what was left of the East Village. My boss had sent me there to learn how to listen deeply. Evie was there to further open her third eye. We were talking our way through boxed lunches, and I'd said more than I meant to. I shoved the last bit of a cookie into my mouth and turned away. A chocolate chip fell from my lips and bounced off my knee. There isn't any shame in having shadows, she said, then reached over and put her hand over mine. Great goddess of day and night, I repeated on the roof of the Carvel, protect me with all your might. Call me petty, but I wished it wasn't such a sing-song rhyme like the commercial jingles I'd hated since I was a kid. The stuff sounded fine when Evie said it, but it felt ridiculous. I felt ridiculous repeating it, even inside my own skull. Evie's heart, our little family, the charm in my hands, these were gifts, I suppose. A way for Evie to prove what she said, to show how much she trusted my judgment, how much she believed the person I once was wasn't the person I was meant to be. The kids I worked with often made me feel this way. But in the end, regardless of the progress any single one of them made, most of them still ended up on the dark side of sane. They forgot where they were. They forgot my name. They forgot to breathe. Great goddess of day and night, I wanted so badly to believe, to immerse myself in possibility. Mixed schemes always had a way of working out. They'd kept my pockets full well into my 20s, and besides getting stabbed, I'd never so much as sniffed a citation. The longer I paced that Carvel's roof, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that the best case scenario had Nick and me walking away with nothing more than a few dirty bills. Not the kind of money worth throwing away the effort I'd put into living on the level. Definitely not the kind I had in mind when I wrapped my dreams of Evie's recovery around Mick's criminal genius. Thanks. That's it.
Is that something you're going to submit somewhere soon, or?
I think so. I think I'm just about there with it. I've got a couple more little edits.
Sounds very, very entertaining.